The laughter hit her before she even reached her locker. It came in quick bursts, sharp, cruel, echoing down the linoleum-tiled hallway like a firecracker going off in a canyon. Aaliyah Brooks didn't have to turn around to know it was about her. She didn't have to see the pointing fingers, the mock whispers, the exaggerated mimicking of her natural afro puff bobbing gently with every step she took. She felt it. Like a heat in her chest. Like shame pushing up against her throat. She'd worn her hair out today for the first time in months. Not pressed, not braided, not slicked back in a ponytail. Just, her. Big, bold, natural coils. The kind her grandmother always called a crown. The kind her mom warned might draw attention at school. And boy, did it. Yo, look at that Chia Pet walkin' down the hallway, one boy cracked, loud enough to draw more laughter. She looked like she lost a fight with a pillow, another voice joined in. Aaliyah clenched her jaw. Her fingers curled tight around the strap of her backpack. She kept walking. She always kept walking. But every step felt heavier, like her shoes were filled with cement. Inside, her thoughts were a storm. Don't cry. Don't run. Don't let them see it hurts. She finally reached her locker, its faded blue paint chipped at the edges like it too had taken a few hits. She spun the dial, hands trembling. Her heart was beating so loud she barely heard the voice that came up beside her. Girl, why didn't you just do the usual slick bun? Jasmine's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried weight like a slap. Jasmine, her best friend since 4th grade. The girl who used to braid her hair during sleepovers, who shared lip gloss and secrets. Who now sounded more like one of them. Aaliyah turned slowly. Jasmine stood with her arms crossed, shifting uncomfortably. I wanted to wear it like this today, Aaliyah said, voice even. Jasmine shrugged. I'm just saying, you know how people are. You could have saved yourself all this. All this. Like being mocked for wearing her hair the way it grew out of her scalp was her fault. Aaliyah blinked. She looked away, back at the combination lock. She swallowed the comeback that burned her tongue, the one that would have turned this moment into a war instead of a wound. Instead, she just said, you used to think it was pretty. Jasmine didn't respond. The silence spoke louder than any words. She made it through first period by sheer force of will, staring at the clock so hard she thought she could bend time. Math equations blurred into white noise. The teacher's voice became a distant hum. At lunch, she sat at the far end of the table, earbuds in, even though the music wasn't playing. It was her way of saying, don't talk to me. But people still did. Is it like, heavy? You know, your hair. Can I touch it? Is it real? They didn't ask out of curiosity. They asked like it was a joke, like her existence was performance art. Aaliyah didn't answer. She just packed her lunch, untouched, and headed to the bathroom. The stall was small and cold and smelled like lemon-scented cleaner. She locked the door, sat on the toilet seat lid, and pulled out her phone. Not to scroll. Not to text. Just to breathe. Her reflection in the small metal mirror above the sink had startled her earlier. Not because she looked bad, but because she looked right. Bold. Honest. Her hair framed her face like a halo, soft but strong. But now, under the weight of ridicule, even that truth felt fragile. She opened her camera and flipped it to selfie mode. Stared. Her eyes were red around the edges. Her lips pressed into a thin, uncertain line. Then, slowly, she lifted the phone and whispered, "This is me." She hit record. My name is Aaliyah Brooks. I'm 15. And today, I wore my natural hair to school. And people laughed. They called me names. They said things like, Chia Pet and Pillow Fight. They said I should've just slicked it back. But you know what? I'm tired of hiding. She paused, chest rising and falling. I'm not ashamed of my hair. I'm not ashamed of being black. This hair is part of who I am. And I'm not gonna apologize for that anymore. She stared into the lens a beat longer, then ended the video. She didn't post it. Not yet. But it was there, saved in her camera roll like a promise. A knock on the bathroom door broke the moment. "You okay in there?" came a voice. It wasn't Jasmine. It was Miss Carter, the new English teacher. Aaliyah took a deep breath, stood up, and flushed the toilet out of habit. She opened the door slowly. Miss Carter stood there with kind eyes and tight braids pulled back into a neat bun. She didn't say much. Just handed Aaliyah a tissue and gave a little nod. "Whenever you're ready, come back to class. We're doing a unit on voices that changed the world. Might be one you'll connect with." The rest of the day passed in a blur. By the final bell, Aaliyah felt like she'd run a marathon, except instead of sweat, it was shame sticking to her skin. As she walked out the front doors, she could still feel eyes on her. Still heard phantom laughter echoing in her head. But she held her chin a little higher. Because somewhere deep inside, something small and fierce had sparked. A whisper that said, "They don't get to decide who you are." As she crossed the parking lot toward her mom's car, her phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "You okay?" Aaliyah stared at it for a long time. Then locked her phone. She didn't know how to answer that question yet. But she knew she was tired of pretending. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The scent of cornbread and shea butter hit Aaliyah the second she walked through the front door. It was warm, earthy, familiar. Safe. She dropped her backpack by the hallway bench and kicked off her sneakers. "I'm home," she called out, not too loud, still a little raw from the day. In the kitchen, "Baby," her grandmother's voice sang back. Aaliyah padded down the hall, the hardwood cool beneath her socks. The kitchen looked like something out of a Southern soul food magazine, cast iron pans hanging above the stove, a jar of wooden spoons by the sink, and a handwritten recipe taped to the fridge. Her mom leaned over the counter, chopping collard greens, while Grandma stirred a pot of something that smelled like heaven. Her mom glanced up first. "Hey, baby. How was school?" Aaliyah hesitated. For half a second, she thought about lying, saying, "Fine," and moving on. But something about the softness in her mom's voice, the strength in her grandmother's eyes, made her pause. "They made fun of my hair," she said quietly. "A lot." Both women froze. Her mom dropped the knife gently on the cutting board and wiped her hands on a towel. "Come sit," she said. Aaliyah slid into the chair at the kitchen table, her hair still puffed and proud, but now slightly frizzed from the long day. She glanced down at her hands, feeling small. Grandma gave the pot one last stir, then turned down the heat and walked over. She sat across from Aaliyah and reached across the table, taking her hand gently in hers. "What did they say?" her grandma asked. Aaliyah swallowed. "Chia pet. Pillow fight. Said I should have slicked it down." Her voice cracked a little. Her mother sat beside her now. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she said. Kids can be cruel, and sometimes it comes from their own insecurity. But it still hurts. Aaliyah nodded, eyes glassy. "I knew people would say something, I didn't think it would feel this bad." There was a silence, heavy but not empty. Then Grandma spoke, her voice low and steady. "You want to know something, baby? When I was your age, I had to straighten my hair just to get a job at the front desk of the dentist's office. They said my afro looked too political. Like I was trying to start a revolution." Aaliyah blinked. "Seriously?" Grandma smiled, a little sad. "Dead serious." They said it with a smile, like they were doing me a favor. I pressed that hair so flat, I burned my ears every other Sunday. Her mom added, when I was in high school, I got detention for wearing braids. Can you believe that? They said it was distracting. Aaliyah looked between the two women. So, this isn't new. Her grandmother leaned back, arms crossed now. No, baby. It's not new. But every time one of us shows up in the world exactly as we are, it shakes something. Makes room. Your hair isn't just hair. It's a message. It says, I exist. I belong. I'm enough. A beat of silence followed. Then Aaliyah let out a shaky laugh. So basically, I'm part of a revolution. Grandma chuckled. That's right. Whether you like it or not. Later that night, after dinner and dishes and too much peach cobbler, Aaliyah sat in her room wrapped in a fleece blanket. Her walls were covered in photos, some framed, some taped up, some curled at the edges from time. There was one of her as a toddler, wild curls exploding in every direction, grinning up at her mom. Another of her first day of kindergarten, hair in two neat puffballs, backpack almost as big as her body. She got up and pulled a photo album from the bottom drawer of her desk. One she hadn't opened in years. Flipping through the pages, she saw her mom in her teens, hair bone straight in every picture. Homecoming, prom, senior portraits. Aaliyah frowned. There were no curls in sight. Then, tucked in the back pocket of the album, she found something unexpected, a small, worn journal with 1998 scratched on the front in silver ink. Her mother's. She hesitated. Then opened it. March 3, 1998. Age, 16. I pressed my hair again today. I don't even know why anymore. I used to think I looked prettier that way. But honestly, it's just safer. People at school don't ask stupid questions. I don't get side eyes. I just blend. But sometimes, when I wash it out, and the curls come back, I feel like I can finally breathe again. Like I'm not hiding. Just, being. Aaliyah read the words twice. Then a third time. So her mom had felt it too, that pull between fitting in and standing out. Between safety and truth. She turned another page. April 21, 1998. Today, my mom, Aaliyah's grandma, told me, your hair is your crown. Don't let nobody make you trade it for a cheap plastic tiara. It made me laugh. But it also made me cry. I don't want to trade anymore. Aaliyah closed the journal, holding it against her chest like a secret. She didn't cry. Not exactly. But something moved through her, like a wave that didn't crash, just rose and stayed there, high and quiet. Before bed, she stood in front of the mirror. This time, she didn't pick up the brush. She didn't reach for gel or ties. She just looked. At the girl with the curls. At the crown. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled, not to convince herself, but because she meant it. Outside, Atlanta hummed with its usual nighttime rhythm, cars in the distance, someone's music thumping down the block, the whistle of wind through tall oak trees. But inside Aaliyah's room, it was still. Still, and strong. Like her. It used to be simple. Aaliyah and Jasmine had been best friends since the 4th grade. Back when friendship was built on who shared snacks, who had the sparkliest markers, and who knew all the moves to the latest TikTok dances. They were inseparable. Jasmine was the kind of friend who stood in the lunch line even when she didn't want anything, just so they could talk. She was the kind of friend who knew which song to play when Aaliyah was sad, and which memes would always crack her up. But somewhere between middle school and now, things started shifting. It wasn't one big fight. It wasn't anything dramatic. Just small, almost invisible changes. A shrug instead of a smile. A missed FaceTime call. A group hangout that Aaliyah wasn't invited to. And now, this. That morning in the hallway had burned into Aaliyah's mind like a bad dream she couldn't shake. But Jasmine's face, the way she looked at her like she was the problem, that haunted her the most. The next morning, Aaliyah stood in front of her closet, unsure what to wear. Her afro was still out. Still proud. Still hers. But the echoes of yesterday hadn't faded. She could almost hear the laughter waiting for her. Her mom peeked her head in. "You sure you want to wear it like that again, baby?" Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Yeah. I'm not changing because they don't get it." Her mom smiled, soft and proud. "That's my girl." At school, the stares came again. Not as many laughs this time, maybe people had moved on, or maybe they were just watching to see what she'd do. Aaliyah kept her head high. Every step she took felt like resistance. In third period biology, she slid into her usual seat next to Jasmine. For a second, they didn't say anything. Then Jasmine finally broke the silence. "You're really doubling down on the hair thing, huh?" Aaliyah froze. "The hair thing," she repeated, slowly. Jasmine glanced around, like she didn't want anyone to hear. "I'm just saying, why bring attention to it if you know people are gonna talk?" "Because it's mine," Aaliyah said, heat rising in her chest. "Because I'm allowed to exist how I want without needing everyone's approval." Jasmine rolled her eyes. "Okay, chill. You don't have to get all deep about it." "No, Jazz. I do." Aaliyah's voice was firm now. "You think this is just about looking different? People like us, we are different. And pretending we're not doesn't make it better." Jasmine leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Look, I'm not trying to fight. I'm just trying to keep you from getting roasted again." "I don't need your protection," Aaliyah snapped. "I needed your support." Jasmine didn't respond. The silence between them stretched long and uncomfortable, like a bridge cracking under too much weight. At lunch, Aaliyah sat at a different table. It wasn't planned. Her feet just didn't take her to the usual spot. She ended up near the back of the cafeteria with a tray of pizza she wasn't going to eat and a notebook she pretended to study. Across the room, Jasmine sat with her new crowd, girls with flawless edges, nails done, AirPods in. They laughed at something on a phone, heads close together. For the first time in a long time, Aaliyah felt truly alone. Until someone sat across from her. "Mind if I join?" It was Kennedy, quiet girl from AP History, always reading, always wearing those big gold hoop earrings and combat boots like she was born to stomp on people's expectations. Aaliyah blinked. Sure." Kennedy set down her tray, unbothered. "I liked what you said yesterday. About your hair." Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. "You heard that?" "Whole hallway heard it," Kennedy said with a half smile. "It was dope. A beat." Aaliyah wasn't used to compliments about her hair. Not in school. Not out loud. "Thanks," she said, unsure how to hold the moment. Kennedy shrugged. "Took me forever to rock my curls. My mom used to beg me to straighten it for church. Said it looked cleaner." She snorted. "Whatever that means." Aaliyah chuckled. For the first time all day, she felt her shoulders relax. Later that afternoon, Aaliyah sat in her room again, fingers hovering over her phone. She scrolled through old photos of her and Jasmine, at the skating rink, at last year's Halloween party, in the mirror wearing matching hoodies. She missed her. But she also knew something had shifted. Maybe permanently. She opened a blank message. "Aaliyah. I don't know what's happening between us. But it hurts." She stared at the screen. Deleted it. Started again. "Aaliyah. You used to have my back. I don't get what changed." Deleted that, too. In the end, she put the phone down and picked up her journal instead. She needed to write, not for Jasmine, but for herself. Journal entry. They say friendships change. That people grow apart. I just didn't think it would be us. I thought we were stronger than that. But maybe she's just not ready for the me I'm becoming. And maybe I have to be okay with that. By the end of the week, Jasmine still hadn't said anything. And Aaliyah? She didn't chase her. Because she was starting to understand something. You can't hold on to people who only love you when you shrink. The journal sat on her nightstand like it had been waiting for her. Aaliyah stared at it for a while before picking it up. Her fingers traced the silver-inked, 1998, on the cover again, gently worn down at the corners. She hadn't asked her mom about it yet. Something told her this was meant to be found in silence. Meant to be felt before it was discussed. She flipped to where she left off. May 8, 1998. Prom is in 2 weeks. Everyone's already booked appointments to get their hair done, wigs, weaves, pressed, curled. I'm still deciding. I want to wear my afro. I want to show up as me. But I also want to feel beautiful. Is it wrong that sometimes I don't feel like both can exist at the same time? The words stopped Aaliyah cold. She'd thought this battle, the one between natural beauty and social expectations, was her generation's. That somehow TikTok and Instagram and influencers made it new. But it wasn't. It ran deeper. Through her mom. Through her grandmother. Through history. That night at dinner, Aaliyah finally asked. Mom, can I ask you something about high school? Her mom raised an eyebrow, mid-bite of roasted chicken. Sure. Did you ever feel like you had to change how you looked to be accepted? Her mom set her fork down gently. All the time. Aaliyah blinked. She wasn't expecting it to be so direct. Her mom leaned back, nodding slowly. I got real good at hiding parts of me. Hair, voice, even the way I dressed. I thought if I could just fit in, I'd be safe. Invisible. But safe. Did it work? Aaliyah asked. For a while, her mom said. Until it didn't. Until I started forgetting what I looked like. A beat. I found your journal, Aaliyah said softly. Her mom didn't flinch. I figured you would eventually, she said, not unkindly. You were gonna wear your afro to prom, Aaliyah said. Her mom smiled, a little sad. I didn't. Why not? I chickened out, her mom admitted. Back then, I didn't have the courage you do now. Aaliyah looked down at her plate. I don't feel brave most days, she mumbled. Brave isn't the absence of fear, baby, her mom said. It's doing the right thing even when you're scared. And you? You're braver than I ever was at your age. Aaliyah didn't say anything right away. But she felt something settle in her chest. Something warm. Like a quiet kind of pride. That weekend, Aaliyah went to the library, not to study, but to explore. She wanted to know more. Not just about hair, but about culture, identity, legacy. If she was part of something bigger, she wanted to understand it. She browsed the shelves of the African American Studies section. Names jumped out at her: Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, Toni Morrison. She checked out 3 books and stayed up reading deep into the night. And then, something happened. An idea. No, more like a calling. The next day at school, Aaliyah walked into English class early. Ms. Carter was rearranging chairs for group discussion, her locks wrapped in a patterned scarf. Aaliyah cleared her throat. Ms. Carter? Can I talk to you about something? Of course, Ms. Carter said, perking up. Everything okay? I think I want to do a project, Aaliyah said. About hair. And identity. Like, how it's connected to history. And self-worth. And culture. I want to tell stories. Real ones. Ms. Carter's eyes lit up. That sounds like a phenomenal idea, Aaliyah. Oral history, social commentary, self-reflection, it's all there. You could turn that into something big. A short film, maybe. Or a podcast. Aaliyah's mind raced. You think people would actually listen? I think people are dying to hear stories like yours, Ms. Carter said, smiling. Especially from voices that haven't always been heard. That night, Aaliyah sat at her desk, notebook open, pen in hand. She wrote a title across the top of the page. The Crown Project. She didn't know exactly what it would become, just that it would be hers. A collection of stories, reflections, maybe even interviews with other girls who had faced the same kind of stares, comments, doubts. This wasn't just about hair anymore. It was about truth. It was about reclaiming space. It was about roots. Before bed, Aaliyah pulled out her mom's journal one last time. She flipped to the last entry. June 10, 1998. Graduation is next week. I still haven't worn my afro in public. But maybe one day, I'll have a daughter. Maybe she'll wear hers. Maybe she'll walk into a room and not flinch. Maybe she'll remind me how to be brave again. Aaliyah smiled, tears brimming but not falling. She whispered to herself, "You don't have to wait anymore, Mom. I got us." The first time Aaliyah said the words out loud, it felt unreal. "I'm starting a project," she told Kennedy the next Monday morning. They were sitting on the steps outside the media center, half-eaten breakfast sandwiches in hand. "It's called the Crown Project. It's about hair. And stories. And identity, I guess." Kennedy raised an eyebrow. "Okay, so you're trying to start a movement now?" Aaliyah laughed, a little embarrassed. "Not exactly. I don't know. I want to make something real. Something that matters." Kennedy popped a piece of egg into her mouth. "Then do it. I mean, who's stopping you?" That simple question hung in the air. Because, honestly, no one was. Not anymore. Ms. Carter gave her a thumbs up and a flash drive. "You can use the school podcast equipment," she said. "I'll book you studio time in the library after school. We've got mics, editing software, the whole deal." Aaliyah blinked. "Wait, seriously? You're not the first student with something to say," Ms. Carter winked. "But you are one of the first willing to say it this loudly." That afternoon, she stayed late, setting up her recording space in a quiet corner of the school library. It wasn't fancy, just a fold-out table, 2 chairs, a mic, and an old laptop, but it felt like a stage. Kennedy showed up 15 minutes later, a fresh twist out bouncing on her shoulders. "Ready?" she asked. Aaliyah nodded. "Hit record." "Hi. My name's Aaliyah Brooks. And this is the Crown Project." Her voice shook a little at first, but she pushed through. "I started this because I wanted to stop feeling ashamed of how I look. Because growing up black, growing up with this hair, meant always feeling like you had to change something to fit in. To be clean. To be professional. To be accepted." She took a breath. "But what if we didn't shrink to fit anymore? What if we expanded, and made the room grow with us?" Kennedy was her first guest. She spoke about the time a teacher tried to send her home for disruptive braids. The time her aunt told her, "You'll never get a job with hair like that." The time a white girl asked her if her twists came from a machine. They laughed. They cringed. They told the truth. And when they were done, they high-fived. "That was actually kind of dope," Kennedy said. Aaliyah grinned. "I want more stories. From everyone." Kennedy smirked. "I know a few girls who'd be down." Within a week, the podcast had 5 episodes. By the end of the second week, Ms. Carter convinced the school to feature it on the morning announcements. Aaliyah nearly dropped her bag when she heard her own voice echo through the intercom system. By the end of that day, 2 freshmen came up to her in the hall. "Are you the girl from the Crown Project?" Aaliyah nodded, heart pounding. "My sister listened to your episode. She cried," one said. "You made me wear my curls today," the other whispered. "For the first time ever." Aaliyah blinked. Swallowed. Said thank you, even though her voice cracked. She went home that day walking taller than she ever had. One night, while editing the latest interview, she found herself staring at the screen, fingers paused over the keyboard. She thought about Jasmine. The silence between them had stretched to nearly 2 weeks now. Aaliyah picked up her phone. Opened Jasmine's contact. Hovered. Then, sent a link to the podcast instead of a message. No words. Just a story. The next morning, Jasmine still hadn't replied. But when Aaliyah passed her in the hallway, Jasmine looked up, and paused. For a split second, something flickered there. Not quite anger. Not quite sadness. Maybe, recognition. Then she looked away. But Aaliyah didn't. She held her head high. Friday morning, Miss Carter pulled Aaliyah aside before class. "There's a youth leadership summit in 2 months, she said. National event. They're accepting applications from students who are creating social impact." Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. "Social impact? You created a space for students to tell their truths," Ms. Carter said. "That's impact. And you're making waves whether you see it or not." Aaliyah's heart started pounding. "What do I have to do?" she asked. "Submit an essay. A project summary. And a 5-minute video explaining your mission." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "That's huge." Ms. Carter smiled. "So are you." That night, Aaliyah sat at her desk, blank Google Doc open, blinking cursor waiting. 5 minutes to tell her story. She'd spent 15 years trying to untangle it. But maybe, just maybe, it was finally coming together. She opened a new document and typed. "My name is Aaliyah Brooks. I was mocked for my hair. I turned that pain into a purpose." She stared at the line for a long time. Then smiled. And kept typing. Aaliyah stared at the application form, her heart pounding. It felt like she was about to jump off a cliff and had no idea whether there was water waiting at the bottom. She wasn't scared. Not anymore. But it was still overwhelming. This scholarship could change everything. The chance to study at one of the most prestigious colleges in the country. The chance to follow her passion for social justice and identity. It was all right there in front of her. The email had come through that morning, one of those mass emails that had a subject line that made her hesitate: "Apply for the National Diversity Scholars Program." Her eyes skipped over the words on the screen. Must have a history of leadership, focus on community impact, essay on overcoming adversity, a recommendation from a teacher. The qualifications were simple enough. But Aaliyah knew this wasn't just about filling out a form. This was about showing who she was, not just a student, but a young woman fighting for her place in the world. And that meant opening up in ways that still felt raw. She took a deep breath and clicked on the first prompt. Prompt 1, tell us about a time you faced a challenge or obstacle and how you overcame it. Aaliyah stared at the blinking cursor for a moment, then typed the first line that came to her mind. "I was mocked for my natural hair. That was the least of what I had to overcome." She thought about everything, the teasing, the jokes that were too close to home. The feeling of walking into a classroom and knowing she wasn't just Aaliyah, she was the other. She was the one who didn't fit the mold. She was the one whose hair was considered unprofessional, too wild, too much. She thought about the conversations she had with her mom. How her mother, at her age, had struggled with the same issues. But she also thought about the strength her mom had shown, even when she wasn't aware of it. How her quiet pride in herself had been a gift Aaliyah was now carrying forward. Aaliyah typed. It wasn't just about the hair. It was about how people like me, girls like me, are taught to shrink to fit into spaces we were never meant to occupy. But I refuse to shrink anymore. And in doing so, I created something bigger than me, bigger than any social norm. She paused, rereading the sentence. It felt right. Prompt 2, why is this scholarship important to you, and how will it help you reach your goals? She was still holding on to the memory of sitting in her room the night she found her mom's journal. The way it felt to hold the weight of a legacy that wasn't just hers. It was a story of survival, of strength, and of love. It was about the power of being seen. Aaliyah typed. This scholarship represents more than just an opportunity. It represents the recognition of voices that have been silenced for far too long. As a young black woman, I have been told I don't fit the mold. But I have learned to create my own mold, and I want to make sure other young women like me feel empowered to do the same. This scholarship will allow me to pursue an education in sociology, where I can build on the Crown Project and create a platform that celebrates diverse identities and voices. It will give me the resources I need to build the future I believe in. She took a deep breath, hit send, and then sat back. For the first time in a long time, Aaliyah felt proud of herself. No more second-guessing. No more doubting. 2 days later, she checked her email during her study hall. An invitation to an interview. Aaliyah couldn't believe it. It was happening. She was actually moving forward. The interview was scheduled for the following week, and Aaliyah knew this was the moment. She didn't have all the answers, but she had enough. She had her truth. And that, she believed, was more than enough. She spent the days leading up to the interview rehearsing her answers, refining her story, but also reminding herself, this wasn't just about impressing someone. This was about standing in her own skin and being proud of it. Proud of who she had become, and proud of who she was still becoming. She even called Jasmine. Hey, Aaliyah said when she picked up. I wanted to let you know, I applied for the National Diversity Scholars Program. There was a long pause. That's amazing, Aaliyah, Jasmine said, her voice soft. I know you're gonna nail it. Aaliyah's heart skipped a beat. It was the first real conversation they'd had in weeks. I hope so, Aaliyah said quietly. I'm just trying to do something good. For me. For us. Jasmine's voice cracked. You are. It wasn't much. But it was enough. The day of the interview arrived. Aaliyah walked into the building with her head high, her curls bouncing with every step. She wore her favorite yellow dress, a symbol of optimism, and she wasn't going to let anyone make her feel small. The interview panel was intimidating, 3 alumni, all in suits, sitting at a large table with pens and clipboards. But Aaliyah took her seat, smiled, and started telling them her story. The panelists asked her about the hardest part of her journey. About what her dreams were for the future. About how she planned to use her education to make change. And Aaliyah answered each question like it was the only one she had ever been asked. I'm here to create space, she said confidently. Not just for myself, but for all the girls who are told they don't belong. When the interview ended, one of the panelists gave her a slow, approving nod. You're exactly what we've been looking for, she said with a smile. Aaliyah's heart raced. Was she hearing this right? That night, as she walked home, the world felt different. Lighter. The possibilities stretched before her, and for the first time, she truly believed that the world could be big enough for her dreams. She didn't know the outcome of the interview yet. But she knew one thing for sure. She had found her voice. The weeks leading up to the scholarship announcement were the hardest part of Aaliyah's journey. It wasn't just the waiting, it was the doubt. The little voice in her head that whispered, what if you're not good enough? What if they don't pick you? No matter how much she tried to push it down, the fear seemed to rise at the most unexpected times, when she was on her way to school, when she looked at her application for the 5th time, when she passed a group of students at lunch who still didn't understand her hair, her pride, her mission. Every time the uncertainty crept in, she reminded herself, I've already done the hardest part. I've already created something. I've already stood up. But that didn't make the waiting any easier. It was a Thursday afternoon when Aaliyah received the email. She sat on the steps outside the school's main building, the autumn sun warming her face, and opened her phone, expecting to see another round of college recruitment emails or a notification from the Crown Project podcast. But there it was, sitting in her inbox. Subject: National Diversity Scholars Program, Decision. From Scholarships at diversityleaders.org. To Aaliyah Brooks. Aaliyah stared at it for a long time, the world around her suddenly feeling small. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, playing out the scenario over and over in her head. But now that it was here, it felt too real. Her hands shook as she opened the email. Dear Aaliyah Brooks. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the National Diversity Scholars Program. Your dedication to celebrating diverse identities and your work on the Crown Project have made you a standout candidate for this award. We are excited to support your educational journey as you continue to inspire others to embrace their unique stories and create lasting change in their communities. Please follow the link below to accept your scholarship and finalize the next steps. Aaliyah sat there for a moment, trying to process what she had just read. Her mind was a whirlpool of thoughts. Was this real? Could this really be happening? Tears pricked her eyes before she could stop them. She hadn't cried in weeks, not since she decided to take this journey seriously. But now, they came out of nowhere, a flood of relief, joy, and disbelief. I did it. Her phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen. It was a message from Kennedy. I knew it. You're gonna change the world. Let's celebrate. Aaliyah couldn't help but laugh through her tears. She quickly typed back. I got it. I can't believe it. I got the scholarship. Later that evening, Aaliyah sat with her mom in the kitchen. The old wooden table between them had been a place of shared stories, quiet support, and sometimes, long silences. But tonight was different. Tonight, Aaliyah wasn't just telling her mom about an achievement. She was sharing a dream realized. I'm going to college, Mom, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Her mom looked at her, eyes glistening. You already have, baby. You've been going since the moment you stood up and said, I'm here. Aaliyah's smile spread wide, and she reached across the table to hold her mom's hand. I wouldn't be here without you. You've always shown me how to be proud of who I am. Her mom squeezed her hand. You're stronger than you know. I always knew you'd do something special. Aaliyah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. I'm going to make sure girls like me never feel ashamed of who they are again. Her mom nodded, her eyes full of pride. You've already started that. The celebration came that weekend. Kennedy, Jasmine, and a few other close friends gathered at Aaliyah's house for a small party. The backyard was full of laughter, music, and the smell of barbecue, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. As they ate, Kennedy raised her glass. To Aaliyah, the queen of the Crown Project, the youngest diversity scholar ever. Everyone cheered, and Aaliyah felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about the scholarship. It wasn't just about the recognition or the honor. It was about the people who had supported her, who had seen her from the beginning and believed in her before she could believe in herself. You did it, Jasmine said, grinning. I mean, I knew you would. But it's still crazy to see it happen. Aaliyah laughed. I don't know how, but I did. You worked for it, Kennedy added, bumping her shoulder against Aaliyah's. You earned it. The truth settled in. All the late nights. The early mornings. The moments of doubt. She had earned this. But as much as she celebrated, Aaliyah couldn't ignore the thought that lingered in the back of her mind, the one that came whenever she thought about what was next. The real challenge hadn't even come yet. College. The future. Creating a legacy. She could already feel the weight of it all on her shoulders. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a gift. A responsibility to something greater than herself. To her community. To every girl who ever doubted that they could take up space. Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Ms. Carter. "Congratulations, Aaliyah. I'm so proud of you. Keep going. This is just the beginning." Aaliyah smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. This was more than just an accomplishment. This was a movement. And she was ready for the next step. She looked around at her friends, her family, the people who had believed in her before she even believed in herself. She was ready to show the world what it meant to take up space, proudly, unapologetically, and with every ounce of her truth. The day Aaliyah left for college was the first day she felt like she was stepping into a new version of herself. For years, she'd known she wanted more, believed she was meant for something bigger. But now, as she stood outside her house with a suitcase in hand and her mom at her side, it was clear that her dreams were no longer abstract. They were real. Her mom wrapped her arms around her in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, baby. You're going to do amazing things." Aaliyah smiled, blinking away tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. You've always believed in me." Her mom kissed her on the cheek and handed her a small envelope. "Here's a little something to remind you of home." Inside was a picture of them from when Aaliyah was a little girl, both laughing at something silly. Her mom had written a note on the back, "You are stronger than you think, and you'll always have a place to come back to. Keep shining, my love." Aaliyah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of that love surround her. She had never doubted that her mother would be her biggest supporter, but now, as she was about to step into the world, it felt like her mom's strength was being passed on to her. "Okay, Mom. Time to go," Aaliyah said, trying to keep her voice steady. The campus was everything Aaliyah had imagined, and more. The towering academic buildings, the bustling quad, the students walking with purpose, all reminded her that this was where she belonged. She was no longer a high school senior wondering what her future would look like. She was a college student now, standing at the edge of a new chapter, with all the possibilities that came with it. Her first week was a blur of orientation sessions, dorm room meetups, and introductions to professors who seemed eager to impart knowledge and challenge her ideas. But in the midst of all that excitement, there were moments when she couldn't shake the feeling that she was out of her depth. One morning, in her introduction to sociology class, she found herself sitting in the front row, trying to focus as her professor talked about the power of societal structures. But her mind kept wandering. She was thinking about her next assignment, the one that would force her to speak up in front of a class of people she didn't know. She hadn't realized it, but the imposter syndrome was creeping in. Who am I to talk about social issues? Who am I to stand up in front of these people and claim that I belong here? Her phone buzzed in her bag, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Kennedy. "How's it going at the new school? Hope you're not letting them intimidate you." Winking face. Aaliyah smiled, her thumb hovering over the reply. "Intimidated? Me?" She typed back. "It's good. I'm just trying to find my place, you know." Kennedy's reply came almost immediately. "I know you'll find it. You always do. Just remember, you're not here to fit in, you're here to make a difference. Own it." Aaliyah felt a surge of confidence, just enough to sit up straighter and push the doubts away. Kennedy was right. She wasn't here to blend in. She was here to show them what it meant to take up space. The first few weeks passed in a blur of readings, discussions, and new faces. Aaliyah was amazed at how much she was learning, how much her perspective was shifting. Sociology was everything she'd hoped it would be, an exploration of power, identity, and the structures that shaped the world. But despite the excitement, she found herself struggling with something unexpected: loneliness. Her dorm room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a box. She missed the familiarity of her friends and the warmth of her mom's home. But more than that, she missed the feeling of being seen. Sure, her professors praised her work, but it wasn't the same as the community she'd built back home. She hadn't found that sense of belonging here, yet. One afternoon, she sat under a tree on the campus quad, reading for her next class. It was the kind of day that made you want to forget about all the responsibilities and just soak in the sunshine. But even as she tried to relax, a part of her couldn't stop thinking about the social dynamics around her. The groups of students laughing and talking, the way they seemed to have their own inside jokes and close-knit bonds. It was hard not to feel like an outsider. That evening, Aaliyah sat at her desk in her dorm room, staring at the half-finished essay on her laptop. The words weren't coming. She knew what she wanted to say, but something was holding her back. Maybe it was the fact that this was her first big assignment in college. Maybe it was the pressure to prove that she deserved to be here. She rubbed her eyes, exhausted. And then, as if by instinct, she opened the folder on her laptop that held all the recordings from the Crown Project. She had started the podcast back home, a way to give voice to young women like her, black, bold, and unapologetic. The podcast had gained a following, but it had always been something personal, a project for her community. She had never really shared it with anyone at school. But tonight, she felt the pull. She clicked on the file that contained her last podcast episode, the one where she had talked about her struggles with identity and the importance of embracing one's true self. Listening to her own voice felt like a reminder of who she was, and why she was here. As the episode played, she smiled at the familiar words, feeling a sense of comfort. Maybe she wasn't fully settled in yet, but the Crown Project was still hers. And it was still her way to connect with people, to give them a piece of her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was from Ms. Carter. "Remember why you're here. Your voice matters more than you know. Keep pushing forward. You've got this, Aaliyah." For the first time since arriving, Aaliyah felt the weight lift off her shoulders. Maybe she didn't have it all figured out. Maybe she still had a long way to go. But she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone in this. Not really. Not as long as she had people who believed in her. And she would find her place. She would make one. That night, Aaliyah finished her essay. It wasn't perfect. But it was hers. And that was enough. She sent it off with a sense of pride and relief, knowing that, step by step, she was building the life she had always dreamed of. And no matter how hard it got, no matter how many doubts she had along the way, she wouldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. It had been a month since Aaliyah had arrived at college. The initial excitement had worn off, leaving behind the hard truth of what it meant to live away from home. The late night studying, the constant pressure to succeed, and the overwhelming sense of being alone in a sea of unfamiliar faces. She spent most of her time between classes and her dorm room, unsure of how to navigate the social circles around her. Sure, she had made some acquaintances, but none of them felt like real friends. She missed Kennedy's loud laugh and Jasmine's constant support. She missed her mom's warm hugs after a long day, the feeling that she was seen and understood. But every once in a while, something would happen to remind her that she wasn't completely lost in the crowd. It was on one of those rare days that Aaliyah met Samira. It started like any other morning, with Aaliyah hurrying to her 8 a.m. history class. She had her head buried in a textbook, trying to cram the night before's readings, when she accidentally bumped into someone outside the lecture hall. Her coffee splashed onto the ground, and her book fell from her hands. "Sorry," Aaliyah muttered, embarrassed, kneeling to grab her things. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The voice was warm and genuine. Aaliyah looked up to see a tall, confident-looking girl with curly hair and an infectious smile. "Let me help you with that." The girl helped Aaliyah collect her books and papers, laughing at the situation. "I swear, I'm usually not this clumsy. Just my luck today." "No problem," Aaliyah said, still a little flustered. "It's just a bad morning all around." The girl extended her hand. "I'm Samira." "You're Aaliyah, right? I think we're in that sociology class together." Aaliyah blinked in surprise. "Oh, yeah. We are. How do you know that?" Samira chuckled. "I remember you because you were the one who actually spoke up in class last week. Most people just sit there and stare at the professor, but you actually made some good points." Aaliyah felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Thanks. I guess I'm just not great at sitting quietly." "I like that," Samira said, giving her a wink. "You know, you're the kind of person I need to hang out with. I swear, all these quiet students are driving me insane." Aaliyah laughed, feeling the first spark of connection. "I guess I'm not afraid to speak my mind." "I can tell," Samira said. "So, do you want to grab a coffee sometime? I think we could have some great conversations." The following week, Aaliyah met Samira at the campus coffee shop. Samira was exactly what Aaliyah needed, a no-nonsense, confident woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and commanded attention, but in the best possible way. Her boldness was contagious. "So, tell me about the Crown Project," Samira said, taking a sip of her coffee. "I've heard a lot about it. That's your thing, right?" Aaliyah nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. "Yeah, it started as a podcast to give black girls a platform to talk about their lives, their challenges, their identities." "That's amazing," Samira said, leaning forward. "We need more of that. More spaces where people aren't afraid to talk about who they really are." Aaliyah smiled, the weight of her vulnerability starting to lift. It felt good to talk about the Crown Project with someone who understood its importance. "Exactly. It's about changing the narrative, about showing the world that we don't have to fit into some box they try to put us in." "I love that," Samira said, her eyes lighting up. "I feel like I could learn so much from you. You've already got the whole self-confidence thing figured out. I admire that." Aaliyah paused, surprised by the compliment. "I mean, I'm still figuring it out. I definitely have my moments of doubt." "Who doesn't?" Samira replied, shrugging. "But I can tell you're not afraid of what's next. That's rare." Over the next few weeks, Samira and Aaliyah began meeting regularly. They'd grab coffee, go to lunch, and chat about everything from their favorite books to their plans for the future. Samira had an ease about her, a sense of certainty that Aaliyah found both refreshing and inspiring. She was fiercely independent, passionate about social justice, and unapologetically herself. For the first time since arriving at college, Aaliyah felt like she had found someone who understood her. Samira didn't shy away from the difficult conversations, about race, identity, and the struggles of being a woman of color in a predominantly white space. They laughed, they argued, and they supported each other in ways Aaliyah hadn't expected. One afternoon, as they sat outside the student center, Aaliyah told Samira about her experience being mocked for her natural hair back in high school, how she had once been embarrassed to embrace it, how she had to unlearn the negative things she had been taught about her own beauty. "I still struggle with it sometimes," Aaliyah admitted. "Even now, there are moments when I feel like I'm not enough." Samira nodded. "I get that. It's like society tells us to fit into this narrow definition of beauty, and when we don't, we feel like we don't belong." Aaliyah sighed, the weight of those words hitting her hard. "But when I think about the Crown Project, I know I'm doing something to change that. I know I'm making a difference." "You are," Samira said firmly. "And you're doing it just by being yourself. You're making space for people like us to exist in the world without apology." Aliyah smiled, her heart swelling. In Samira, she had found more than a friend. She had found an ally, someone who was also fighting for a better world, someone who would stand with her, no matter what. That night, as Aliyah lay in her bed, staring up at the ceiling, she reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. Just a few weeks ago, she had felt isolated, unsure of where she belonged. Now, she had people who saw her, people who understood her. She thought about the scholarship she had won, about the dreams she was chasing, and about the future that was still so uncertain. There was so much more to do, so many more people to meet, and so many more challenges to overcome. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what was to come. She had found her place, and with the support of people like Samira, she knew she was ready to take on anything. Aliyah sat at her desk in the dimly lit corner of her dorm room, the weight of the week pressing down on her. Her textbooks lay open in front of her, but her mind wandered elsewhere. The pressure of her scholarship, her coursework, and her place in the world had reached a boiling point, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something had to give. It had been 2 months since she'd arrived on campus, and in that time, her life had become a whirlwind. Every moment seemed to be filled with a new opportunity, a new challenge, and sometimes, it felt like the weight of it all might suffocate her. She had worked tirelessly on her assignments, her podcast, and her budding friendship with Samira, but lately, something was missing. There was no time to breathe, no time to just be. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her reverie. It was a message from Kennedy. "How are you holding up, girl? I know college can be overwhelming, but you got this. Don't forget to take care of yourself." Aliyah smiled, her thumbs quickly typing a response. "I'm trying, but it's hard. I feel like I'm juggling a million things at once. I just don't know if I'm cut out for all of it." Kennedy's reply came instantly. "I hear you. But listen, you've already proven so much to yourself and to everyone around you. Just take it one step at a time. And remember, you're doing great." Aliyah read the message over and over, feeling a sense of comfort settle in her chest. Kennedy always knew exactly what to say. But even with that reassurance, she knew she had to face the reality of her situation. She had come this far, but now she was standing at a crossroads. The pressure was mounting, and she didn't know which direction to take. It all started the week before, when she received an email from the university's prestigious internship program. The email had been unexpected, but it was clear, this was the kind of opportunity that could make or break her future. The internship would give her hands-on experience in a field she was passionate about, social justice advocacy. It was everything she had ever wanted. It would open doors, give her the platform she needed, and it was the kind of recognition that could elevate her career. But there was a catch. The internship was demanding. It required a full-time commitment, and with her current schedule of classes, her podcast, and the scholarship that she had fought so hard to earn, it would mean sacrificing something, maybe even everything. Aliyah's heart raced as she read the email again. This could be the chance of a lifetime, but it could also cost her the stability she'd worked so hard to build. The thought of losing control over her schedule, of pushing herself even further, made her stomach twist in knots. What if she wasn't strong enough to handle it all? What if this was the breaking point? The next morning, Aliyah found herself walking through campus, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. Samira had been telling her all week to just go for it, to grab every opportunity with both hands. "You're here to make an impact," she would say, as if it was that simple. But to Aliyah, it didn't feel that way. She needed advice, but she wasn't sure where to turn. She didn't want to burden her mom, who had always believed in her even when Aliyah had doubted herself. She didn't want to seem weak. But she had to admit that the weight of her choices was starting to wear her down. As she passed a bench near the student center, she spotted Professor Michaels, the sociology professor who had made such an impact on her first semester. He was sitting by himself, his face buried in a book. Aliyah hesitated, then walked over. "Professor Michaels," she called, feeling a bit awkward. He looked up with a warm smile. "Ah, Aaliyah. How are you?" "I'm good, just a little overwhelmed," she admitted, sitting down beside him. "I need some advice." "Of course, anything," he said, setting his book aside and giving her his full attention. Aaliyah hesitated for a moment, then launched into everything, the pressure of balancing her scholarship, her podcast, her coursework, and now the internship offer. "I just don't know if I can do it all," she said, her voice faltering. "I don't want to let anyone down, but I'm afraid I'll fail if I try to do too much." Professor Michaels nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's natural to feel that way. But here's the thing, you've already proven that you can succeed when you put your mind to something. This internship is an incredible opportunity, but you also have to consider whether it aligns with what you want long-term. Does it feed your passion? Does it bring you closer to your goals?" Aaliyah sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "Yes, it does. But I feel like if I take it, I'll lose sight of everything else. I'll burn out." "I understand," Professor Michaels said gently. "But sometimes, it's not about doing everything at once. It's about taking a step forward and trusting that the next step will reveal itself. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. You can focus on what's in front of you and let the rest fall into place." Aaliyah sat back, considering his words. She had always been someone who liked to plan, to control her destiny. But maybe, just maybe, this was the moment to let go of that need for certainty and trust in the process. Later that evening, as Aaliyah sat in her dorm room, she thought back to the conversation with Professor Michaels. What if she didn't have to have it all figured out? What if this internship could be the next step in her journey, even if it didn't feel like it fit into her perfectly structured life? She had come this far by embracing uncertainty, by taking risks and pushing herself outside her comfort zone. Maybe this was just another challenge to face. Maybe the struggle was part of the process. With a deep breath, Aaliyah clicked on the internship application link and began filling it out. There was no going back now. She had made her choice. But as she clicked submit, a feeling of peace washed over her. She didn't have to do everything perfectly. She just had to keep moving forward. And that was enough. The first day of the internship arrived like a storm, exciting yet intimidating. Aaliyah stood in front of the mirror in her dorm room, adjusting the collar of her blazer. Her reflection stared back at her, uncertain and eager at the same time. She had gone from a girl who felt out of place in her new college environment to someone who had just been handed an opportunity that could change everything. But with that opportunity came pressure, a pressure she hadn't fully anticipated. She took one last look at her phone, seeing a text from Samira, "Go in there and own it. Don't let them doubt you. You've got this." Aaliyah smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for her friend. Samira had been with her every step of the way, pushing her to believe in herself when she wasn't sure she could. It was the kind of support Aaliyah had never realized she needed until she had it. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her bag, slammed the door behind her, and made her way to the building that housed the internship office. It was a sprawling modern structure near the heart of campus, sleek glass walls, a buzzing entrance, and a sense of purposeful energy. As Aaliyah stepped inside, she was greeted by the sharp smell of coffee and the steady hum of focused conversations. "You must be Aaliyah," a voice said, snapping her out of her thoughts. Aaliyah turned to find a woman in her late 30s, dressed in a smart blouse and slacks, holding a folder in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. "I'm Rachel, your supervisor. Welcome to the team." "Hi, Rachel," Aaliyah said, smiling nervously and shaking her hand. "Thank you for having me." Rachel's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "No problem. We're really excited to have you on board. We've been following your work with the podcast, and we're confident you're going to bring a lot to the table." Aaliyah's heart raced at the mention of the Crown Project, her podcast about empowering young Black women. She had never imagined that her side project would open doors like this. Rachel led her to a small, open workspace filled with other interns. Some were typing away on laptops, others were talking in hushed tones. The office had an open concept layout, designed to promote collaboration, but it also created a sense of being on display, as if everyone could see what you were doing and how you were doing it. As she sat down at her desk, Aaliyah tried to focus on the tasks Rachel had outlined for her. She was tasked with conducting research on community outreach programs, compiling data for presentations, and helping to develop content for the nonprofit's upcoming campaigns. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was an opportunity to make an impact, and that was what mattered. The first few hours went by in a blur. Aaliyah dove into her work, scanning through reports and gathering the necessary data. But soon, a knot started to form in her stomach as she noticed something, a subtle undercurrent of tension in the office. Aaliyah overheard snickers and dismissive comments from a couple of the other interns, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the familiar sting of judgment. At lunch, as she sat down at a table with a few of the interns, one of the women, Kate, leaned in with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, Aaliyah," Kate began, her voice dripping with curiosity, "how does it feel to be the token intern?" Aaliyah's face flushed, and she forced herself to smile, trying to brush off the comment. "I don't really think of it like that," she replied, keeping her tone calm. "Oh, I'm sure you don't," Kate said, laughing a little too loudly. "But you know, diversity quotas and all that." Aaliyah's heart pounded in her chest, and her mind raced. She had always known that her presence in predominantly white spaces could be uncomfortable for others, but this was the first time she had encountered it so openly. The subtle microaggressions, the passive-aggressive remarks, it was as if her very presence was being scrutinized. "Actually, I'm here because of my qualifications," Aaliyah said, her voice steady despite the growing anger inside her. "And I'm here to learn and contribute." Kate's smile faded as the other interns shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Aaliyah's grip tightened around her sandwich, but she refused to let herself get rattled. "I think I'll grab a coffee," she said, standing up and walking away before anyone could say anything else. She left the cafeteria with a rush of frustration swirling inside her, but she refused to let it break her. It was just one comment. She wasn't going to let it define her experience. Over the next few days, Aaliyah poured herself into her work, doing everything she could to prove herself. She stayed late, going over data, preparing reports, and even offering to take on additional projects. But despite her best efforts, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was constantly being judged, that no matter how hard she worked, there was always someone waiting for her to mess up. It all came to a head one Thursday afternoon when Rachel pulled Aaliyah aside to discuss her progress. Aaliyah had spent the previous night working late to finish a report for a high-stakes meeting the next day. She was nervous but hopeful that this would be her moment to shine. But Rachel's face was serious as she looked over the report. "Aaliyah, I'm really impressed with your work ethic," she began, "but there are a few things we need to address." Aaliyah's heart sank. "What's wrong?" Rachel sighed. "You've missed some key details in your data. It's important that we're 100% accurate when presenting this. If you're going to handle the outreach reports, we need you to be more precise." Aaliyah's mind raced. She had worked so hard, but it wasn't enough. She had let the smallest details slip through the cracks, and now her credibility was at stake. "I understand," Aaliyah said, forcing herself to keep calm. "I'll fix it." Rachel nodded, but Aaliyah could see the disappointment in her eyes. "I know you can. Just take a little more time to double-check everything, okay?" That night, as Aaliyah sat in her dorm room, her mind kept replaying the conversation. The sting of failure was sharp, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the overwhelming weight of self-doubt creep in. Was she really cut out for this? Was she in over her head? But as the tears welled up in her eyes, something inside her shifted. She had faced challenges before, plenty of them. She had been mocked for her hair, judged for her identity, and made to feel like she didn't belong. But she had fought back every time. This was no different. She grabbed her laptop, opened the report, and started over. It would take time, but she was determined to get it right. She couldn't afford to let one mistake define her. She would learn from this, and she would keep moving forward. The internship might be hard, but that didn't mean it was impossible. She wasn't giving up now. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following Aaliyah's minor failure at the internship were some of the hardest she had faced in a while. Her heart had sunk when Rachel pointed out the flaws in her report, but she refused to let that moment define her. Instead, she poured herself into the work, determined to prove that she was more than just a mistake. Every evening, she stayed up late, cross-checking every detail, refining her work, and making sure it was flawless. By the end of the week, she had rewritten the report, triple-checked the data, and sent it off with a sense of quiet pride. When Rachel reviewed the new version, she smiled, nodding with approval. "This is exactly what I was hoping for, Aaliyah. Great job." The word sent a warm wave of relief through her. But beyond the praise, what mattered more was that Aaliyah had reclaimed her confidence. The internship had presented challenges, but it was also showing her the depth of her own resilience. She wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. As the weeks went by, Aaliyah found herself becoming more comfortable in the office. She had learned to adapt to the rhythm of the work, to push through the long hours, and to ask for help when she needed it. What had once felt overwhelming was slowly becoming second nature. Her colleagues, though still distant at times, started to take notice of her work ethic. She had earned their respect, and with it, a little more space to be herself. Samira, who had been checking in on Aaliyah regularly, was one of the first to notice the change. "You're looking a lot more settled," she said one afternoon when they met for coffee. "How's everything going at the internship?" Aaliyah took a sip of her iced coffee, smiling as she leaned back in her chair. "Better than I thought. I've been putting in the work, and it's paying off. I even got a couple of kudos from Rachel for the last project I finished." Samira grinned. "That's amazing. I knew you could do it. You've got the talent, Aaliyah. It was just about giving yourself time to adjust. I bet you're feeling a lot more confident now, huh?" Aaliyah paused, looking out the window at the bustling campus below. "Honestly, yeah. I don't think I realized how much I was holding myself back. I've been so scared of messing up or not being good enough. But I've learned that failure is just part of the process. It doesn't have to mean the end." "I'm really proud of you," Samira said, her voice warm with genuine admiration. "You've come so far. I think this internship is going to be a huge stepping stone for you. You've got the heart for it." Aaliyah smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. Samira had always been there for her, cheering her on through every step, but now, Aaliyah could feel the confidence building in herself. She had earned her place here. And she wasn't going to let anyone or anything take that away from her. At the office, Aaliyah's new sense of self-assurance was evident. She approached each task with clarity, no longer second-guessing herself at every turn. She had learned to ask questions when needed, but more often than not, she trusted her instincts and the skills she had cultivated through years of hard work. Her colleagues began to notice her ability to handle pressure, especially when things got tough. One afternoon, Rachel pulled her aside again, but this time the tone was different. There was no criticism, no correction. Just a calm, encouraging smile. "Aaliyah, I've been really impressed with your progress. You've taken on a lot, and you've managed it with grace." Aaliyah's heart skipped a beat. She had expected a request for more work, or perhaps another task she wasn't ready for. But Rachel's words were a breath of fresh air. "We're gearing up for a new initiative," Rachel continued. "It's a big project, and we need someone who can manage multiple components of it." I'd like to offer you a chance to take the lead on one of the outreach campaigns. What do you think? The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Aaliyah was silent. A part of her wanted to say no, to shy away from the responsibility, to hide behind her insecurities. But another part of her, the stronger part, knew this was exactly the opportunity she had been waiting for. I'd be honored, Aaliyah said, her voice steady, even though her heart raced in her chest. I'm ready for the challenge. Rachel nodded. Great. We'll meet tomorrow to go over the details, but I'm confident you'll do a fantastic job. As Aaliyah walked back to her desk, she felt a surge of excitement. This was her moment to show just how much she had grown. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into this office weeks ago, uncertain of her abilities and unsure of her place. She was different now, stronger, more confident, and ready to step up. That night, Aaliyah sat down at her desk in her dorm room, her laptop open in front of her. She was tasked with researching a new community outreach campaign, something that would require both creative thinking and precise organization. She had been given the chance to lead this project, and she knew she had to give it everything she had. This was her moment to prove to herself, and to the world, that she belonged in this space. For hours, she dug into research, drafting plans, and sketching out ideas. The project wasn't going to be easy, but Aaliyah was determined to make it a success. She could already see the outline of her campaign taking shape, the pieces falling into place. The words Rachel had said echoed in her mind, "I'm confident you'll do a fantastic job." And for the first time in a long while, Aaliyah believed it. She wasn't just here to take up space. She was here to make a difference. The following week, Aaliyah presented her ideas to Rachel and the rest of the team. She stood at the front of the room, her palms sweaty but her voice steady as she explained her vision for the outreach campaign. Her presentation was detailed, innovative, and backed by the research she had spent countless hours perfecting. As she finished, she looked around the room, searching the faces of her colleagues for a reaction. Rachel was the first to speak. "Aaliyah, this is fantastic. I'm impressed by the depth of your research and the creativity you've put into this. I think we have something special here." Aaliyah's chest swelled with pride. She had done it. She had proven to herself that she was more than capable of taking on big responsibilities. She had earned her spot at this table. The other interns seemed more supportive as well. Kate, the one who had made that rude remark on the first day, gave Aaliyah a nod of approval. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Aaliyah had earned her respect. Later that evening, Aaliyah sat outside, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The campus around her was alive with the energy of students heading to and from their classes, but for a moment, Aaliyah just allowed herself to sit in silence. She thought about everything that had led her to this point, the long nights, the doubts, the struggles, and the victories, both big and small. She had come so far. And for the first time, she felt like she could finally take a deep breath, knowing that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Kennedy. "I'm so proud of you, Aaliyah. Keep going. You're unstoppable." Aaliyah smiled to herself and typed back, "Thanks, Kennedy. I'm finally starting to believe that." She was. And she wasn't stopping now. The air felt different now. Aaliyah had changed. The girl who had once been full of doubt and uncertainty about her place in the world had evolved into someone confident, driven, and more self-assured. It hadn't been easy, but she had worked hard, fought through the obstacles, and embraced the challenges that came her way. And it was paying off. The campaign she had led was a success. Her ideas had not only impressed Rachel, but they also garnered attention from senior leadership at the nonprofit, making it clear that Aaliyah's hard work and dedication were not going unnoticed. Her name was starting to be mentioned more in the office, not just as an intern, but as a valuable contributor to the team. Rachel had even asked her to take on a larger project, one that involved developing a new partnership with another nonprofit. It was a huge responsibility, and Aaliyah couldn't deny the excitement bubbling up inside her. She had earned this opportunity, and now it was time to prove that she was ready to take on even more. One morning, as she sat at her desk, sipping her coffee and reviewing the details of the new project, her phone buzzed with a message from Samira. "Are you free for lunch today? We need to catch up." Aaliyah smiled, texting back quickly, "Of course. I'll meet you in the usual spot at noon." The sound of a knock on her office door brought her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see Rachel standing in the doorway, holding a folder in her hand. "Aaliyah, do you have a minute?" Rachel asked. "Of course, Rachel," Aaliyah replied, standing up from her desk. She followed Rachel to a small conference room, her mind racing with questions. Had something gone wrong with the project? Was she being pulled off it? Rachel motioned for Aaliyah to sit, placing the folder in front of her. "I wanted to check in with you. You've been doing great work, and I'm really impressed with how you've taken the lead on the outreach campaign. But there's something else I'd like to discuss." Aaliyah sat up straight, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "We've been talking as a team about your potential," Rachel began, looking at Aaliyah with a thoughtful expression. "And we think you'd be a great fit for a leadership role in a new initiative we're launching. It's a program designed to empower underrepresented youth through mentorship and career readiness." Aaliyah's heart skipped a beat. This was it. A real leadership role. She had come so far, but this felt like the kind of opportunity she had only dreamed of. Rachel continued. "We're looking for someone who is passionate, driven, and ready to take charge. And we think you have the right qualities to lead this program." Aaliyah's mind raced. Was she really ready for this? Could she handle a role like this? She had no experience leading a program of this magnitude. But then she remembered all the moments that had led her here, the late nights, the sacrifices, the growth. She had worked hard to get to this point, and she wasn't going to let fear hold her back now. "I'm honored," Aaliyah said, her voice steady, despite the excitement bubbling inside her. "I'd love to take on this role." Rachel smiled. "I knew you'd say that. We're excited to see what you can do." The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, planning sessions, and brainstorming ideas for the new program. Aaliyah had always known that leadership would come with its own set of challenges, but nothing had quite prepared her for the weight of responsibility that came with leading such an important initiative. She had to oversee the program's development, collaborate with other departments, and ensure that everything ran smoothly from start to finish. It was a lot, but she was determined to rise to the occasion. Her confidence continued to grow as she navigated the complexities of the project. She found herself making decisions, calling the shots, and learning to manage a team. It was different from the work she had done before, but it felt right. Every challenge she faced only made her stronger, and every success reaffirmed that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. That afternoon, Aaliyah met Samira for lunch at their usual cafe on campus. Samira was waiting for her at a corner table, scrolling through her phone. When Aaliyah arrived, Samira looked up with a grin. "So, tell me everything. How's the internship going?" Aaliyah smiled, sliding into the seat across from Samira. "It's going great. Honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happening. They just offered me a leadership role in a new program they're launching. It's all about empowering youth through mentorship and career readiness." Samira's eyes widened. "Wait, what? That's huge. Aaliyah, you're going to be leading a whole program?" Aaliyah nodded, her excitement palpable. "Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility, but I'm ready for it. It feels like everything is finally coming together." "I'm so proud of you," Samira said, her voice filled with genuine happiness. "You've worked so hard for this. I always knew you had it in you. This is just the beginning, Aaliyah." Aaliyah smiled, feeling the weight of her friend's words. "Thanks, Samira. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done without your support. You've been with me through everything." Samira grinned. That's what friends are for. But you've earned this all on your own. You're not just doing it for yourself, though. You're going to make such a difference for so many young people. You're giving them the opportunity to see what's possible, just like you did. Aliyah looked out the window at the students passing by, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had come so far from that girl who had been afraid to show up, afraid of not being enough. Now, she was leading. She was inspiring. And she was just getting started. That evening, Aliyah sat at her desk in her dorm room, reviewing her notes for the new program. The excitement of the day still buzzed in her chest, but there was a quiet sense of determination in her as well. She had taken on a huge responsibility, but she wasn't going to let it overwhelm her. She had learned how to manage pressure, how to lead with confidence, and how to keep pushing forward even when things got tough. The door to her dorm room creaked open, and Kennedy walked in, her usual grin spread across her face. "I heard the good news," she said, plopping down on the bed next to Aliyah. "A leadership role? I'm not surprised. You were born for this." Aliyah smiled, feeling the warmth of Kennedy's support. "Thanks, Kennedy. It's a big leap, but I'm ready. I'm not going to let this opportunity slip away." "You won't," Kennedy said with conviction. "You've already proven that you can handle anything. This is just another step." Aliyah took a deep breath, looking out the window at the fading light of the evening. "You're right. I'm ready for whatever comes next. This is my time." The next morning, as Aliyah walked into the office, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just showing up anymore, she was here to lead, to make a difference, and to leave her mark. As she sat down at her desk, she opened her laptop and began to work on the new program's details. The challenges would keep coming, but now, Aliyah was ready to meet them head-on. The horizon had opened up before her, and she was determined to chart her own course. Aliyah stood at the front of the conference room, her heart pounding in her chest. The glass walls of the office reflected the early morning light, and the room was filled with faces, some familiar, some new. Around the table were senior leaders, volunteers, and the young professionals who had signed on to help with the mentorship program. Aliyah had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but as she stood there, ready to present the strategy for the program, the weight of her responsibility hit her full force. This wasn't just a presentation. This was the defining moment in her career so far, the one that would either prove that she belonged in this role or show that she wasn't quite ready. It was hard to ignore the nagging voice in her head telling her she wasn't prepared enough, that she wasn't qualified, that maybe she had taken on too much. But Aliyah had learned one important thing over the past few months: doubt was a powerful enemy, but it was also something she could overcome. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice steady. "I'm excited to present to you the mentorship program we've been developing. Over the past few weeks, we've worked to create something that will not only empower youth but also provide them with the tools they need to succeed in their careers. I believe this program can change lives, and I'm here to walk you through the plan." The room fell silent as she clicked through the slides on the projector, each one showcasing her meticulous research, her thoughtful strategies, and her passion for the project. Her plan was thorough. She had built in a clear framework for the mentorship process, had outlined measurable goals, and was prepared to discuss how they would evaluate the success of the program. She had thought of everything, or so she hoped. Her hand trembled slightly as she advanced to the next slide, showing the timeline for the first 6 months of the program. The first cohort of men's would be chosen in just a few weeks, and Aliyah felt the weight of the decision on her shoulders. She knew that the success of the program was going to hinge on these first few steps. She looked up, meeting the eyes of the room. "Our goal is to have the first cohort in place by the end of the month. We'll start with 30 men's. Young people from diverse backgrounds who have expressed interest in entering the workforce but need guidance and support. From there, we'll move into the mentoring phase, pairing each mentee with a mentor who will work with them for 6 months. The mentors will be professionals from a range of industries who are passionate about giving back to the next generation. Aaliyah paused, letting her words hang in the air. She could see the room was engaged, but a small voice of doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. Would they buy into her vision? Would they believe in her plan? She was still young, still learning, and despite everything she had accomplished so far, the imposter syndrome was hard to shake. Then Rachel spoke up, breaking her moment of self-doubt. This is impressive, Aaliyah. I can see how much work you've put into this. But tell me, how do we plan to engage the ments throughout the program? How will we keep them motivated? Aaliyah was ready for this question. She smiled, her confidence growing as she spoke. That's one of the key components of the program. We'll hold monthly workshops to help the ments with skills like resume building, interview techniques, and personal branding. We'll also host bi-weekly check-ins with their mentors to track their progress and offer support. The goal is to make sure they never feel like they're in this alone. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. I like the approach. But I also think we need to be realistic about the challenges. Mentoring relationships aren't always easy. What's your plan if a mentor and mentee aren't clicking? Aaliyah had already anticipated this concern. We've built flexibility into the program. If a mentor and mentee aren't clicking, we'll intervene early and reassign the mentor. We don't want anyone to feel like they're stuck in a relationship that's not working. The success of the program depends on making sure both sides are getting value. Rachel leaned back in her chair, considering her response. That sounds solid. And how do you plan to scale this program over time? Aaliyah smiled, feeling a surge of pride. This was her vision, and she was fully prepared to answer. Once we've established the first cohort and refined our approach, we'll expand by creating additional cohorts each year. We'll also look at partnering with other organizations to increase our reach. We'll keep refining the program as we learn what works and what doesn't, ensuring that we continue to meet the needs of our ments. For the next 30 minutes, Aaliyah fielded questions, each one challenging her to think deeper about the logistics, the sustainability, and the potential impact of the program. And with each question, she found herself growing more confident. She had thought through every angle, every possibility, and had built a plan that could stand up to scrutiny. As the meeting came to a close, Rachel looked around the room. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns? The room was silent for a moment, and then one of the senior leaders spoke up. I'm impressed. This is a thoughtful, well-developed plan. I think it has real potential. Let's move forward with it. Aaliyah felt a rush of relief. She had done it. She had not only convinced them of the program's worth, but she had also solidified her place as a leader within the team. The room erupted in applause, and Aaliyah couldn't help but smile. She had taken a huge step forward, not just in her career, but in her belief in herself. Later that afternoon, after the meeting had concluded, Aaliyah sat alone at her desk, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message from Samira. So, how did it go? Aaliyah quickly typed back, it went amazing. They loved the plan, and were moving forward with it. I can't believe it. She leaned back in her chair, a smile spreading across her face. It felt like everything she had worked for, everything she had struggled with, had led her to this moment. She had faced her fear head-on, broken through the wall of self-doubt, and emerged stronger. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow across her office, Aaliyah realized something important. This was just the beginning. The journey she had started months ago, when she had first stepped into that office, unsure of herself, had led her here. She had broken through the barriers that had once seemed insurmountable, and now, nothing seemed impossible. That evening, she called Kennedy. I did it, she said, her voice filled with awe. The program is a go. I'm leading it. It's real. Kennedy's voice was filled with excitement. Aaliyah, I'm so proud of you. You've earned this. You've earned everything that's coming your way. Aaliyah smiled, her heart full. It feels like the start of something big. And I'm not going to stop now. The morning after the presentation was a blur of activity. Aaliyah was no longer an intern or a newcomer in the office. She was leading a major initiative, and with that came a new level of responsibility that she wasn't entirely prepared for. The weight of it settled in like a heavy coat as she sat at her desk, scanning through her emails, trying to get a grasp on everything that needed to be done. There were meetings to schedule, documents to finalize, and mentors to recruit. She had expected this level of responsibility, but nothing quite prepared her for the avalanche of tasks piling up. Her phone buzzed, and she looked down to see a message from Rachel: "We need to talk ASAP. Please stop by my office when you get a chance." Aaliyah's stomach twisted in an instant. Had something gone wrong with the program? Was the funding being pulled? The self-doubt crept in almost automatically, but she pushed it away. She had worked too hard to let fear take over now. She grabbed her notebook and headed down the hallway to Rachel's office, the familiar buzz of the office around her almost deafening. It felt like every step brought more pressure, but she wasn't going to back down. "Hey, Rachel," Aaliyah said, walking into the office. Rachel looked up from her desk, her face calm but serious. "Aaliyah, have a seat. I want to talk about the mentorship program." Aaliyah sat down, her mind racing. "Of course, what's going on?" Rachel sighed, her fingers tapping lightly on her desk. "We've hit a few roadblocks that I need to make you aware of. There are some concerns from the board about the program's scope and long-term sustainability. They want more detailed projections, more data to show the potential impact, and they want to see if the funding will hold up." Aaliyah's heart sank. She had known there would be challenges, but this was bigger than she anticipated. She had expected excitement, momentum, but this felt like a sudden cold splash of water. "I understand," Aaliyah said, keeping her voice steady, though inside she was anything but. "What do I need to do to address their concerns?" Rachel nodded, her gaze firm. "You're doing great work. But you'll need to come back with a more detailed proposal. We need to be able to show the board that the program is sustainable, that it can grow and last. I'm confident you can handle this." Aaliyah nodded slowly, trying to gather her thoughts. This was a setback, but it wasn't the end. She'd overcome tougher challenges before. "I'll get on it right away," she said. Rachel smiled. "I know you will. Just remember, this is a part of the process. We're not there yet, but I believe in you." The next few days were a blur of research, number crunching, and meetings. Aaliyah spent hours pulling together projections for the program's future, reaching out to mentors for testimonials, and digging into data that could prove the long-term impact of the initiative. The pressure was mounting, and every time she thought she was getting closer to a solution, another challenge seemed to surface. She couldn't afford to let the board down, not after everything she had worked for. Late one night, as she sat hunched over her laptop, she felt her frustration rising. She had been working on this proposal for what felt like days, and yet it still didn't seem to be enough. The numbers weren't adding up the way she wanted them to, and the revisions weren't coming together as quickly as she had hoped. She had been so focused on delivering the perfect plan that she had begun to lose sight of what had really made the program great in the first place, the people it was meant to serve. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. What was she missing? She had all the numbers, the projections, the data, everything the board had asked for. But it wasn't enough to just have the right figures. She needed to make them see the human impact of the program, the real lives it was going to change. The answer came to her in a flash: she needed stories. Not just statistics or projections, but stories of the people who would benefit from the program. The real, tangible impact it would have on their lives. She needed to humanize the program. Aaliyah immediately began reaching out to the first group of ments, those who had signed up for the program. She asked them to share their hopes, dreams, and why they believed mentorship could change their lives. Within hours, she had received heartfelt messages and powerful stories that illustrated the importance of the program beyond the numbers. The next morning, Aaliyah walked into Rachel's office with a new proposal in hand, her confidence restored. "I've updated the proposal," she said, placing the document on Rachel's desk. "I think it's what the board was looking for." Rachel looked at her, eyebrows raised. "What's new?" "I've included testimonials from the men who have signed up. They talk about their struggles, their dreams, and why they believe mentorship can change their lives," Aaliyah explained. "It's not just about the numbers anymore. It's about the impact we're going to have on real people." Rachel flipped through the pages of the proposal, nodding as she read. "I see what you did here. This is powerful, Aaliyah. You've shown the human side of the program. I think this will make a huge difference with the board." Aaliyah smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. "I hope so. It feels right. I don't want them to just see this as a project. I want them to see it as something that can really change lives." Rachel looked at her, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You're on the right track. Now, let's get this in front of the board." That afternoon, Aaliyah found herself sitting in a boardroom surrounded by some of the most influential people in the organization. The air was thick with tension, and she could feel her palms beginning to sweat. This was it, the moment of truth. As Rachel introduced her to the board members, Aaliyah took a deep breath and began her presentation. She walked them through the updated proposal, emphasizing the real-world impact the program would have on the lives of the men. She shared stories of their struggles, their dreams, and their aspirations, bringing the program to life in a way that no statistic could. The board members listened intently, their expressions thoughtful as she spoke. When she finished, there was a long silence in the room. Then, one of the board members, an older man who had been skeptical from the start, spoke up. "Aaliyah, I have to admit, I wasn't sure about this program before. But after hearing these stories and seeing the impact it could have, I'm convinced. We're in." Aaliyah's heart skipped a beat. "Really?" she asked, barely able to believe what she was hearing. The board member nodded. "Absolutely. You've shown us that this isn't just another program, it's a movement. We'll back you." The room erupted into applause, and Aaliyah felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had done it. She had risen above her doubts, above the obstacles, and proved that she was more than capable. Later that evening, as she walked back to her dorm, Aaliyah couldn't wipe the smile from her face. She had faced the hardest challenge of her career and come out on top. It wasn't just about the program anymore. It was about the way she had handled the pressure, the way she had refused to let self-doubt define her. And as she looked up at the stars, she realized that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but she had already proven to herself that she was capable of rising above them. No matter what came next, she would face it head-on, with the same determination and confidence that had brought her here. The excitement of the board's approval still lingered, but as Aaliyah sat at her desk the following week, she felt a creeping sense of exhaustion. The weight of responsibility had grown heavier since the presentation. She was no longer just a young woman with an idea. She was now the face of an important mentorship program, and the expectations were mounting. There was work to do, decisions to make, and every move she made was being watched. Her phone buzzed, and Aaliyah picked it up to see a text from Samira. "You free for lunch today? I feel like we haven't caught up in forever." Aaliyah smiled, relieved at the thought of catching up with her best friend. The last few weeks had been a blur of meetings, proposals, and late nights at the office. She had barely had time to breathe, let alone spend time with Samira. She quickly typed back, "I'd love to. I could really use a break. Where should we go?" Samira's reply came in seconds, "How about that cafe we love? The one on 5th Street? Aaliyah agreed, and soon enough, she was walking out of the office, leaving behind the pressure that had been building up for days. The crisp autumn air hit her as she stepped outside, a welcome contrast to the stuffy office. As she made her way to the cafe, her mind wandered to the events of the past few weeks. She had accomplished so much, but it was starting to feel like she was losing herself in the process. When she arrived at the cafe, Samira was already there, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee in front of her. Aliyah smiled as she slid into the seat across from her. "You look tired," Samira remarked, her eyes scanning Aliyah's face. "You've been going non-stop. How are you holding up?" Aliyah sighed, sinking into the chair. "I'm fine, just overwhelmed. The program's moving forward, but now it feels like the pressure's mounting. Everyone's looking to me for answers, and I'm afraid I'm going to drop the ball." Samira leaned forward, concern etched on her face. "You're doing amazing things, Aliyah. But don't forget to take care of yourself, too. You've been giving so much of yourself to this, but what about you? What's going on with you?" Aliyah paused, the question hitting her harder than she expected. She had been so focused on the mentorship program, on proving herself in this new role, that she hadn't stopped to think about her own needs. She was working late, waking up early, and in between, trying to manage her personal life, which had almost completely slipped away. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I've lost track of everything else. It feels like the more I try to balance things, the more I'm failing at everything else. I barely have time to see my family, let alone take care of myself. And my relationship with Kennedy, we haven't had a real conversation in weeks." Samira nodded, her expression understanding. "Aliyah, I get it. You're doing so much, but you're not superhuman. You can't pour from an empty cup. You need to find balance. Otherwise, something's going to give." The words hit home. Aliyah had been so consumed with proving herself at work that she had neglected the people who mattered most to her. Her family, her friends, and even Kennedy had been pushed to the background as she chased success. But Samira was right, something had to change. She couldn't let this all consume her. "I know," Aliyah said, a sigh escaping her lips. "But how do I fix this? I don't want to let anyone down. The program is too important." "You don't have to do it all alone," Samira said gently. "You have a team. You have resources. And you have to be okay with leaning on others when you need help. It's not weakness, it's smart leadership." Aliyah looked at Samira, feeling the weight of her words. "You're right. I've been trying to do everything on my own, but that's not sustainable." "Exactly," Samira agreed. "And don't forget about yourself. You're not going to be able to lead anyone if you're running on empty." Aliyah smiled at her best friend, grateful for her honesty. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. It was easy to get caught up in the momentum of success, but Samira had reminded her of something important: balance was key. She needed to find a way to lead the program without losing herself in the process. Later that afternoon, as Aliyah returned to the office, she felt a renewed sense of clarity. She still had a lot of work ahead of her, but she was determined to set healthier boundaries. She wasn't going to let this opportunity define her at the expense of everything else in her life. As she walked into her office, she found a message waiting for her from Kennedy. "Hey, we need to talk tonight. Can we meet up?" Aliyah's stomach tightened. She knew what that meant. Kennedy had been feeling the strain of her absence, too. They had barely spoken in days, let alone spent quality time together. Aliyah had been so consumed by the program that she had neglected the most important relationship in her life. She quickly typed back, "Of course. Let's meet after work. I've missed you." That evening, they met at their usual spot, a quiet bar that had become their place to unwind after a busy day. Kennedy was already sitting at a corner table, a soft smile on his face when Aliyah walked in. She took a seat across from him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of unspoken words hung between them. Finally, Kennedy broke the silence. "Aliyah, I get it. I know this program is important to you. But you've been so distant lately. I miss us. I miss spending time together, talking about things that aren't work-related. Aaliyah's heart sank. He was right. She had been so absorbed in the program that she had allowed her relationship with him to fall by the wayside. She had neglected the person who had always been there for her, the person who loved her despite all her flaws and insecurities. "I'm sorry, Kennedy," she said, her voice soft. "You're right. I've been so caught up in everything, but I didn't realize how much it was affecting you, and us." Kennedy reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I don't want to compete with your dreams, Aaliyah. But I also don't want to lose you in the process. We need to find a balance." Aaliyah squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of the truth in his words. "I promise I'll do better. I'm not going to let this program take over my life. I'm going to make more time for you. For us." They sat together in silence, the tension between them easing. Aaliyah realized that Kennedy's words were more than just a plea for attention, they were a reminder that her dreams were only worth pursuing if she didn't lose herself in the process. She could have both, her career and her relationships, if she was willing to make the effort. As Aaliyah left the bar that night, she felt lighter. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready to break through the barriers she had created for herself. She was ready to find a balance between her work and personal life. And with Kennedy by her side, she knew she could handle whatever came next. The road ahead would still have challenges, there would be more late nights, more meetings, more tough decisions, but Aaliyah was no longer afraid. She had learned that true leadership wasn't about doing it all on your own. It was about knowing when to ask for help, when to step back, and when to put yourself and the people you love first. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Aaliyah's office, a soft glow illuminating her desk as she sat, staring at her screen. The air was thick with anticipation. Her inbox was flooded with emails, some about the mentorship program, others with routine office updates, but one email stood out, a subject line that made her blood run cold: urgent, issues with ment enrollment. Aaliyah clicked on it immediately, her heart pounding. The email detailed a growing issue with the enrollment process. Several ments had reported errors in their applications, with some even claiming that their applications had been completely lost. What's worse, the email suggested that if the issue wasn't resolved soon, there could be delays in the program's launch, affecting dozens of students. Aaliyah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. This was the moment she had feared, the first true test of her leadership. She had worked tirelessly to get the program off the ground, and now, it seemed like everything was falling apart at the seams. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, but she refused to let it crush her. She immediately gathered her team for an emergency meeting. As she stood before them, looking at the anxious faces of her colleagues, Aaliyah took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady but firm. "We've encountered an issue with the enrollment system. Some ments are experiencing technical difficulties, and we need to address this as quickly as possible to avoid any delays." Rachel, who had been with the program since its inception, spoke up. "Aaliyah, this is serious. If we don't resolve this, we could lose the trust of the students, and the board. The program needs to launch on time. What's the plan?" Aaliyah clenched her fists, feeling the pressure mounting. She had no time to second-guess herself. She had to act fast. "We'll need to contact every mentee affected and make sure their applications are submitted correctly. We'll also need to work with the IT team to identify the source of the issue and fix it as soon as possible." The team nodded, but Aaliyah could see the doubt in their eyes. They had all worked so hard, and now everything was in jeopardy. But she wasn't about to back down. This was her program, and she was going to fight for it. "We'll split into groups," she continued. "Rachel, you'll oversee the communication with the ments. I want you to personally reach out to them and ensure that their applications are corrected. Samira, you'll coordinate with IT to fix the technical issues. I'll handle the media side of things, keep the stakeholders updated and assure them that we are working on a solution. We have no time to waste." The next few days were a blur of frantic work. Aaliyah spent hours drafting emails, talking to the media team, and coordinating with the IT department. The pressure was relentless. She was exhausted, her body aching from sleepless nights and long hours at the office. But she couldn't afford to slow down, not now. Every time she thought they were getting closer to resolving the issue, something new would arise. More men's reported problems with their applications, the system continued to malfunction, and the board members began to grow impatient. Aaliyah could feel the tension building in the air, and it seemed like no matter what she did, it wasn't enough. On the third night, as she sat alone in her office, staring at her computer screen, she felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had given everything to this program, and yet it still felt like the whole thing was unraveling. She had put her heart and soul into this, and now, it was slipping through her fingers. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up to see a text from Kennedy. "Hey, I know you're busy, but how's it going? You okay?" Aaliyah hesitated for a moment, then typed back, "It's bad. The program's in trouble, and I feel like I'm failing. I'm doing everything I can, but it's still not enough." There was a pause before Kennedy replied, "You're not failing. You're doing everything you can. But you're human, Aaliyah. You can't fix everything on your own. It's okay to lean on others when you need to." Her heart ached at his words. She had been so focused on doing everything herself that she had forgotten the value of support. She wasn't alone in this, she had her team, her friends, and Kennedy. But in her drive to prove herself, she had pushed everyone away. Aaliyah put down her phone and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The pressure was overwhelming, but Kennedy was right. She needed to trust her team. She needed to let them help. The next morning, Aaliyah called an impromptu meeting with her team. As they gathered around the table, she stood up and addressed them, her voice calmer than it had been in days. "I've been trying to do everything myself. I've been trying to fix every problem on my own, and that's not fair to any of you. I can't do this without you. I need your help." Rachel spoke first. "Aaliyah, you've been doing an amazing job. We all know how much you care about this program. But we're a team. We're in this together." Samira nodded in agreement. "We're all here for you, Aaliyah. You don't have to carry the weight of this on your own. We'll figure it out." Aaliyah felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she looked around at the people who had supported her from the start. She wasn't alone. They had her back, just as she had theirs. And together, they could overcome this challenge. With renewed determination, Aaliyah and her team dove back into the work. They worked tirelessly through the day and night, identifying the issues with the enrollment system, reaching out to every mentee affected, and ensuring that everything was back on track. Slowly but surely, they began to fix the problems, one step at a time. By the end of the week, the issues were resolved. The enrollment system was up and running smoothly, and the program was set to launch on time. Aaliyah had never felt more exhausted, but as she looked at her team, she knew they had made it through the storm together. That evening, as Aaliyah walked out of the office, she couldn't help but reflect on everything she had learned over the past few days. She had been tested, pushed to her limits, but she had come out stronger on the other side. She had learned the value of asking for help, the importance of teamwork, and the resilience that came from facing adversity head-on. She wasn't perfect, and there would be more challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid of them. She knew that as long as she had the right people by her side, there was nothing she couldn't overcome. The following weeks were marked by an air of relief, as the mentorship program launched without further incident. The men's had successfully enrolled, and everything seemed to be moving forward. But just as Aaliyah began to feel like she could finally relax, a new challenge arose, one that would stretch her leadership abilities to new heights. It all started with a phone call from the head of the board, Mr. Mitchell. Aaliyah had never been particularly close to him, but she respected him deeply. He was known for his no-nonsense approach and sharp decision-making skills. When he called her into his office that afternoon, she had no idea what to expect. "Miss Carter, Mr. Mitchell greeted her with a firm handshake as she entered his office. "Please, have a seat." Aaliyah sat down, mentally preparing herself for whatever was to come. She had a hunch it wasn't just a casual check-in. "I've been impressed with your work on the mentorship program," Mr. Mitchell began, settling into his chair. "But there's an issue we need to discuss. We've recently received some feedback from a few key stakeholders, and I need you to take over a new initiative." Aaliyah's stomach tightened. She had a feeling she knew where this was going. "What kind of initiative?" "It's a leadership development program for senior managers in the organization," Mr. Mitchell explained. "It's been struggling for months. The previous leader didn't meet expectations, and now, we need someone to step in and turn things around. I believe you're the person for the job." Aaliyah's mind raced. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, but it came with a heavy responsibility. The pressure of managing the mentorship program was already immense, and now she was being asked to take on an entire leadership development initiative. It was a monumental task, one that could define her career, for better or worse. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm honored, but the mentorship program is already taking up most of my time. I'm not sure I can handle both at once," Aaliyah said, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked at her intently. "I understand your concern, but I think you're the right person for this. You've demonstrated strong leadership, and I believe you have the vision to make this program succeed. It's an important opportunity for both your career and the company's growth." Aaliyah felt the weight of his words sink in. This was no longer just about the mentorship program, it was about her future. If she accepted this new challenge, she would be thrust into a completely different role, one that required a different set of skills. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she couldn't afford to turn down such an opportunity. "I'll do it," Aaliyah said, her voice firm. "But I'll need support. I can't do this alone." Mr. Mitchell gave her a reassuring nod. "Of course. We'll ensure you have the resources and team you need. Just know that this is your chance to truly step into a leadership role. Don't let it slip by." As Aaliyah left his office, her mind was spinning. She had just accepted a challenge that would stretch her to the limits, but deep down, she knew it was the right choice. It was time to step into a leadership role that wasn't just about managing tasks, but about guiding people, making tough decisions, and shaping the future of the company. The next few days were filled with planning. Aaliyah had to dive into the leadership development program headfirst, learning about the senior managers it was designed for, the objectives it aimed to achieve, and the reasons for its current failure. She spent hours reviewing documents, speaking with HR, and meeting with colleagues to understand the nuances of the program. It was clear that the program's struggles weren't just logistical, they were deeply rooted in issues of engagement, communication, and a lack of strong leadership. As Aaliyah sat down to create a strategy, she found herself overwhelmed. She had no experience in managing a program of this magnitude, let alone one for senior leaders. But this was her chance to prove that she could lead at the highest levels, and she wasn't going to let fear hold her back. 2 weeks later, Aaliyah stood in front of a room full of senior managers for the first time. The room was filled with a mix of seasoned professionals, each with their own experience and expertise. Some were skeptical about the new direction Aaliyah was proposing for the program, while others seemed intrigued by her vision. She could feel their eyes on her, scrutinizing her every word. But this time, she wasn't the young man trying to prove herself. She was the leader, responsible for guiding these individuals and helping them develop the skills they needed to succeed. "Aaliyah, I have to admit," one of the senior managers spoke up, "this is a big shift. But you've got our attention. How do you plan to address the issues we've been facing?" Aaliyah took a deep breath and responded, "The key to leadership development is engagement. We need to move beyond theoretical concepts and focus on practical, actionable skills that will have a direct impact on our day-to-day work. My plan is to revamp the program with a more hands-on approach, incorporating mentorship from senior leaders themselves, as well as real-world challenges that align with our company's goals." Another manager, who had been silent up until that point, chimed in. I agree that this is the right direction. But how do you plan to ensure that everyone, especially the more senior leaders, buy into this? They're used to doing things their way. Aaliyah nodded, acknowledging the challenge. I understand that change can be difficult. But we're not just asking for change for the sake of it, we're asking for change that will drive results. My approach will be collaborative. We'll bring in feedback from all levels and create a program that's not just top-down, but one that resonates with everyone involved. There was a long pause as the group processed her words. Aaliyah's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground. She had a plan, and she knew it could work. Finally, Mr. Mitchell spoke, his voice calm but authoritative. I'm impressed with your vision, Aaliyah. I think we have a solid foundation to build on here. Let's see where you can take us. That evening, as Aaliyah sat in her office reflecting on the day, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had faced a room full of seasoned professionals, and she had held her own. She had shown them that she was ready to lead, not just manage. But even as the excitement of the day faded, Aaliyah knew the real work was just beginning. She was stepping into a new leadership role, one that would challenge her, stretch her abilities, and force her to grow in ways she had never imagined. She wasn't just managing a program anymore, she was shaping the future of the company. The road ahead would be tough. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But Aaliyah was ready. She had faced adversity before, and each time, she had come out stronger. Now, as she prepared to lead a new initiative, she knew that resilience would be her greatest strength. It had been 3 months since Aaliyah took over the leadership development program, and things were moving forward more smoothly than she had anticipated. Her strategy to make the program more hands-on and collaborative had received positive feedback, and senior leaders were beginning to embrace the changes. Yet, as things started to fall into place, Aaliyah knew that the next hurdle wouldn't be a matter of planning or execution, it would be about influence. Her next test came when she was asked to meet with one of the most influential board members, Charles Hawthorne. Charles was a powerful figure in the company, his opinions shaped policies, his support could make or break initiatives, and his resistance to change was well known. Aaliyah had heard stories about him, how he had often clashed with younger leaders who tried to shake things up, and how his word held tremendous weight in the company's decision-making processes. He was a force to be reckoned with, and Aaliyah had never had to navigate someone like him before. When she was told that she needed to meet with him to present the progress of the leadership development program, a knot formed in her stomach. Charles Hawthorne was known for his sharp mind and even sharper criticism. This wasn't going to be a routine update. It was a crucial opportunity for Aaliyah to prove her ability to influence and navigate corporate politics at the highest level. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, and Aaliyah spent the days leading up to it preparing meticulously. She reviewed every detail of the program, the feedback from participants, and the tangible improvements that had been made. She knew that if she was going to win Charles over, she needed to show him results, solid, undeniable results. The day of the meeting arrived, and Aaliyah dressed in her usual professional attire, a tailored navy blue blazer, a crisp white blouse, and a pair of black heels. But as she stood in front of the mirror, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered. This wasn't just another presentation. This was a defining moment. When Aaliyah walked into Charles's office, the first thing she noticed was the stark contrast between their two worlds. His office was imposing, with dark mahogany furniture and large windows overlooking the city. Everything about the space exuded power, and it was clear that Charles had worked hard to cultivate this environment, an environment where he was the undisputed authority. Charles looked up from his desk as she entered, giving her a sharp, appraising glance. "Miss Carter," he said in a deep voice, "I trust this won't take long. I've heard mixed things about the program. Let's hear what you've done to fix it." Aaliyah felt her heart beat faster, but she steeled herself. This was her moment to prove that she was more than just a program manager, she was a leader capable of making a lasting impact. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Hawthorne," she began, keeping her voice steady. "I've reviewed the leadership development program, and we've made significant strides in the past few months. We've restructured the curriculum to be more hands-on and interactive, with real-world challenges that directly apply to our daily work. The feedback from participants has been overwhelmingly positive, and we've seen measurable improvements in engagement and retention. Charles raised an eyebrow. Measurable improvements? I'm not interested in vague numbers. Show me specifics. Aaliyah knew this moment would come, and she had prepared for it. She pulled out a tablet, displaying a report on the program's progress. Here's a breakdown of the feedback we've received. Engagement levels have increased by 25% compared to last year, and we've seen a 30% improvement in the application of leadership skills in the workplace. Additionally, 85% of the participants have reported feeling more prepared to take on leadership roles. She waited for his response, but Charles didn't immediately speak. He simply sat back in his chair, scrutinizing the data on the screen. Aaliyah couldn't tell whether he was impressed or just waiting for her to slip up. You've made some improvements, Charles said finally, his voice neutral. But what about the long-term impact? Can you guarantee that these changes will actually result in stronger leaders across the company? Aaliyah nodded confidently. Yes, Mr. Hawthorne. The goal of this program is not just to improve skills in the short term, but to foster a culture of leadership within the organization. We've introduced a mentorship component where senior leaders are actively involved, guiding the next generation of talent. This ensures continuity and growth. Charles leaned forward, his steely gaze fixed on her. I've seen many initiatives like this come and go, Miss Carter. What makes you think this one will stick? What makes you different from all the others who came before you? Aaliyah felt the pressure building, but she didn't flinch. I understand your skepticism, Mr. Hawthorne. But what sets this program apart is that we're not just focusing on the theory of leadership, we're making it practical, actionable, and measurable. We're holding people accountable, and we're giving them the tools they need to succeed. The leadership development program is evolving, but more importantly, it's aligning with the company's strategic goals. There was a long silence as Charles absorbed her words. Aaliyah could feel his skepticism lingering, but she wasn't done yet. She knew that if she wanted to truly influence him, she had to go beyond just presenting facts, she needed to appeal to his sense of vision. Mr. Hawthorne, Aaliyah continued, I know this program might not seem like a quick fix, but the future of this company depends on strong, adaptive leaders. We are shaping the next generation of leadership, and I believe that with your support, we can make a lasting impact. The question isn't whether this program will succeed, it's whether you're willing to be part of that success. Charles looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Aaliyah held her breath, hoping that her words had struck the right chord. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and gave a slow, deliberate nod. All right, Miss Carter, he said, his tone softening. You've made your case. I'm willing to give this program another shot. But understand this, I'll be watching closely. If it doesn't deliver, I'll be the first one to pull the plug. Aaliyah exhaled in relief, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. I won't let you down. As she left his office, a sense of accomplishment washed over her. She had done more than just present a plan, she had influenced one of the most powerful figures in the company. She had proven that leadership wasn't just about managing people, it was about guiding them, inspiring them, and, most importantly, making them believe in your vision. That night, as Aaliyah sat in her apartment reflecting on the meeting, she realized that this was what true leadership was about. It wasn't about authority or control, it was about influence, persuasion, and inspiring others to believe in your vision. She had just taken a significant step in her career, and with the support of her team, she was ready for whatever came next. The days after her meeting with Charles Hawthorne seemed to blur together. Aaliyah had successfully won his approval for the leadership development program, but her work was far from over. The challenge was now about maintaining momentum, proving that the program could live up to its promise, and ensuring that it would leave a lasting impact on the company. Aaliyah spent her days reviewing feedback from participants, refining the program's components, and working closely with senior leaders to ensure that the mentorship and practical training aspects were being executed effectively. She could see the program beginning to take root. People were engaging more than ever, and the senior leaders were becoming more involved in the growth of younger talent. But as the program grew, so did the stakes. Aaliyah knew that if the program were to succeed in the long run, it had to become more than just a temporary initiative, it had to become part of the company's culture. And that was where the real test lay. It was a Monday morning when Aaliyah received an unexpected email that made her stomach drop. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting with the board of directors." The email was brief, but its tone was clear. This was no ordinary update. It seemed like the board was calling her in for something critical. She immediately thought of Charles Hawthorne. Had something gone wrong with the program? Was this meeting to discuss whether it had lived up to expectations? Aaliyah's heart raced as she prepared for what could be a pivotal moment in her career. The following day, she entered the boardroom, where a sea of familiar faces waited. Sitting at the head of the table was Mr. Mitchell, the head of the board, flanked by other senior executives and Charles Hawthorne himself. Aaliyah's nerves were on edge, but she kept her composure. "Miss Carter," Mr. Mitchell began, his tone serious. "We've asked you here today to discuss the future of the Leadership Development Program. As you know, we've been keeping a close eye on its progress." Aaliyah nodded, wondering where this conversation would lead. "Let's get straight to the point," Charles Hawthorne said, his eyes sharp. "We've been impressed with the changes you've made to the program, but there are concerns among some of the senior stakeholders about the sustainability of the initiative. They're worried about the long-term impact and whether it can be maintained as the company grows. We need to know, can you ensure that this program will continue to thrive and evolve, even when you're no longer leading it?" Aaliyah's mind raced. This was exactly what she had feared. The weight of the question was immense. The success of the program had been a reflection of her leadership, but could she guarantee that it would continue without her? She paused, taking a moment to compose herself. This wasn't just a question of results, it was about leaving a lasting legacy, something that would outlive her tenure. "Yes," Aaliyah responded, her voice calm but confident. "The program will continue to thrive. Not because of me, but because we've built it in a way that's sustainable. We've integrated it into the company's strategic goals, and we've created a structure that allows future leaders to take over and continue its evolution. I've already started mentoring key team members to ensure a smooth transition." She continued, "Leadership development isn't just about one person, it's about creating a culture of growth. If we want to develop leaders who can adapt to any situation, then we must ensure that the program is flexible, inclusive, and part of the organization's DNA. It should be a living, breathing entity that continues to grow with the company, no matter who's in charge." There was a long silence after she finished speaking. Aaliyah felt the weight of the room's expectations. This was it, the moment that would determine whether her work had made a lasting impact. Finally, Mr. Mitchell spoke. "We appreciate your vision, Miss Carter. And we've seen the positive results so far. However, as Charles mentioned, sustainability is key. We want to be sure that this program won't lose its momentum after you move on to other projects." Aaliyah nodded, acknowledging his concerns. "I understand. But I've worked hard to build this program with a long-term vision. The foundation is solid, and we've put measures in place to ensure that future leaders will take the reins. I'm confident that we've set the stage for lasting success." Charles Hawthorne leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. "You've made your case, Miss Carter. We'll be monitoring the program closely, but I'm inclined to believe that you've set the company on the right path." Aaliyah exhaled deeply, feeling a rush of relief. The pressure was still there, but she had passed the ultimate test. Her vision for the program had not only convinced the board, it had secured its place within the company's future. In the weeks that followed, Aaliyah continued to refine the leadership development program, ensuring that its components were continuously evolving and adapting to the changing needs of the company. She worked with her team to identify new opportunities for improvement, ensuring that the program remained relevant and impactful. But more importantly, Aaliyah knew that the true test of leadership wasn't about how well she could steer the program herself, it was about how well she could empower others to take the reins. Her focus was now on mentorship, making sure that the leaders she had nurtured through the program were ready to take on greater responsibilities. She wanted to ensure that the legacy of the program would continue long after she was gone. One day, as she sat in her office reflecting on everything she had accomplished, Aaliyah received a call from Mr. Mitchell. "Miss Carter, I wanted to personally thank you for everything you've done. The leadership development program has exceeded our expectations, and your efforts have made a real impact on the company. I'm proud to say that we've decided to make this program a permanent part of our strategic goals moving forward." Aaliyah's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just about the accolades or the recognition, it was about knowing that she had built something that would continue to shape the company's future. As the months passed, Aaliyah's role in the company grew. She continued to take on more leadership responsibilities, mentoring a new generation of leaders and helping to guide the company through its next phase of growth. But despite the increasing demands of her career, she never lost sight of the lessons she had learned along the way. True leadership isn't just about achieving personal success, it's about empowering others, creating lasting change, and leaving behind a legacy that will continue to impact those who follow. Aaliyah had come a long way from the shy, unsure girl who had once struggled to embrace her natural hair. Through her journey, she had discovered the true power of resilience, self-belief, and leadership. She had learned that leadership was not about authority, it was about influence, vision, and the ability to inspire others to rise to their full potential. And as she looked ahead, she knew that her journey was far from over. She was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead, confident that she had the skills, the knowledge, and the heart to lead with purpose. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?